Full disk encryption is one of the most important security settings to have on modern computers, especially if we're talking about a laptop or a smartphone. Because if you're out somewhere and somebody were to steal your laptop or your phone, whether they snatch it out of your hands or they break into your car and they steal your laptop bag, now not only does that person have your computer, but they also have access to your data, which is probably worth a lot more money than the computer itself, especially if we're talking about a work computer or if it's got your personal documents on it, financial information. And with fraud and identity theft being so common these days and such a hassle to deal with, the theft of an unencrypted device can actually cause way more problems for you many years after that stolen computer has been replaced. Now, since Windows is the most commonly used consumer operating system and it encrypts all of its devices with BitLocker encryption by default, or at least that's the case with Windows 11, BitLocker is probably one of the most popular or most widely used full disk encryptions for consumer laptops. And it turns out that the FBI has access to all of these BitLocker keys if they send a request to Microsoft. And this is possible because by default, BitLocker saves your recovery key the access to get into this encryption to your Microsoft account. And with Windows 11, you probably wouldn't even notice this because, like I said, Microsoft is enabling BitLocker by default when you set up Windows 11. It's not even an additional setting that you really have to think about configuring. And Windows 11, along with later editions of Windows 10, require you to set up or sign into a Microsoft account during installation, at least in normal setups. I mean, there are some ways that you can get around it if you go off the on-screen instructions. You could just disable internet while you're setting up Windows 11. Usually that just forces it to create a local account because there is no cloud for you to connect to. And there's also command prompt commands that you can put in to get past that account creation page. But whenever you do inevitably connect to the internet in your Windows 11 PC, Microsoft is going to constantly pester you to sign in or sign up for that Microsoft account. And then when you do, they're going to store those BitLocker recovery keys in their cloud for the feds to access whenever they feel that it's necessary. And besides the feds being able to access your BitLocker encryption keys, another big issue with the whole BitLocker setup is that a lot of people actually suffer data loss or they have to go through the grueling process of recovering a Microsoft account in order to recover their data. So people set up a Windows computer and maybe they're doing it for the first time in years, right? And they just get thrown off by the whole, Microsoft account thing because maybe they're coming from Windows 7. And so they forget to write down their new Microsoft account credentials because, chances are they don't really have one, or maybe they don't realize they have one. And so they don't write down that email and password. And, it's also kind of difficult to do that because it's not like you can just copy paste it into Notepad since you're on the setup screen. And then at some point, once they've been using the computer for a while and they have important data saved to it, something would end up happening that requires the BitLocker key to unlock the computer, maybe a system restore or something like that. And the person doesn't have this key, so now they're effectively locked out of their PC and can't access their data. And they don't know anything about the Microsoft account because, again, it's something that they just kind of did in the moment, right? They wanted to get access to use their damn PC, so they made up some crap really quickly and they didn't know or they didn't realize what email was connected to. And, even if they did know what email it's connected to, it's kind of hard for them to access it because they don't have access to their damn computer. Now, of course, I know some of you are saying maybe the Microsoft people that don't mind this, they're like, oh, just log into your Microsoft account from your phone. And that is what you should do. But that's not how most consumers are thinking. I mean, most people aren't even thinking Microsoft when they touch their smartphone because Microsoft doesn't make smartphones for one, or at least they don't anymore, but also like what Microsoft software or what Microsoft services are you going to use on your phone? I mean, you're probably not using Word or Excel. You're probably not using OneDrive on your phone because, again, Apple's got iCloud, Google's got Google Drive, better integrated into the phone than OneDrive would be. So there's not even much of a reason to have the Microsoft account on your phone, or again, for most consumers to think of a Microsoft account when they are touching their phone. I mean, it's almost like BitLocker is anti-consumer because, it's probably caused more data loss from what I just described, people getting locked out of BitLocker and locked out of their Microsoft accounts, than it's actually prevented data theft from the devices getting stolen, and then thieves can't get access to it because it's encrypted. And what's honestly more disturbing to me than the fact that Microsoft is giving the FBI people's BitLocker encryption keys is the fact that they're actually able to give the FBI these encryption keys, which says a lot about how Microsoft is storing that data. Because you probably read articles about Apple, for example, not giving the FBI access to somebody's iPhone or to somebody's iCloud account. And this is because Apple built these systems in such a way that even they don't have access to them, right? Or at least they don't have access when you use advanced data protection, because then everything in your iCloud is being end-to-end encrypted. But you should still take that statement with a little grain of salt, right? Because Apple's full disk encryption and most of their software stack, just like Microsoft's, is proprietary. So there's really no way for us to know for sure that it's doing everything that they tell us it's doing. And the security guarantee that you get with proprietary software is essentially just trust me, bro. Trust the multi-trillion-dollar big tech company that profits off of selling your data to pinky promise to keep your data secured. And even if the compromise on this security is not profit motivated, there still could be some kind of backdoor that these companies are compelled by the government to build in to people's phones so that the government can access them in case of some super crazy emergency, a terroristic threat, to recover the encryption keys of a supposedly secure iPhone, and it'd be really difficult for anybody to actually detect if this backdoor was there. But if we assume that what Apple says about advanced data protection is true, then nobody but the user with the password is able to access the data that is secured by it. So since we know that Microsoft actually does have the ability to give the FBI your BitLocker encryption key, that means that Microsoft has a plain text copy of people's BitLocker keys somewhere, or more likely they're encrypting plain text copies of it with their own key, which introduces another big risk to consumers, because what if Microsoft's key gets stolen and then someone's able to access that key database? You see, this is the reason why I don't recommend anybody use these centralized cloud solutions, especially if they aren't fully end-to-end encrypted like Apple's supposedly is, because then the cloud that stores everybody's encryption key becomes the holy grail for hackers. The state-sponsored groups, the kind that pull off these really big hacks that you see on the news, they typically are not going to go for the individual person's BitLocker key, because if they were to hack and defraud someone's Mima in Kansas, then the chances are those hackers are not even going to be able to cover the cost of the hack, right? Or even a week of their operations if they wiped out her bank account, they sold her personal data to every Tom, Dick, and Harry that's on the dark web. But if they can grab a huge chunk, an entire database of encryption keys, and then sell that to the script kiddies and then the scammers that do target the little old ladies, then we have a digital pandemic on our hands, all because Microsoft pushed this cloud on people who really don't even need it. I wouldn't trust the security of Microsoft's cloud, especially because in the AI world, we know that Microsoft is vibe coding Windows to the extent I think they've claimed that 30% of Windows is vibe coded at this point. And it's gotten so bad that they actually broke Notepad. Of all applications, I mean, the most basic text editor that's been around since the 1980s, one of Microsoft's most trusty pieces of software was actually broken in a recent update, because that's what you get with a vibe-coded OS that's connected to a vibe-coded cloud. So if you needed another reason to choose Linux over Windows, it's because in current year, Microsoft unironically gives the FBI easier access to your data than they're giving you.